Whispers of EADRIC House. In the remote and mist-shrouded countryside of Yorkshire stood EADRIC House, an ancient manor with a sinister reputation. Its stone walls, weathered by centuries of harsh winds and rain, loomed over the desolate moorland like a grim sentinel. For generations, villagers spoke of strange occurrences and unsettling whispers that emanated from its halls. Many believed the house to be cursed, a place where the veil between the living and the dead was perilously thin. The story begins with the arrival of the Hargrave family. Jonathan Hargrave, a successful London solicitor, had purchased EADRIC House for a fraction of its market value. Enchanted by the manor's grandeur and the prospect of a peaceful rural life, he moved there with his wife, Elizabeth, and their two children, Emily and Thomas. Despite the locals' warnings, Jonathan dismissed the tales of hauntings as mere superstition. On the day they moved in, the sky was overcast, and a thick fog clung to the landscape. The air was heavy with an unnatural silence, broken only by the distant cries of crows. As the family crossed the threshold, they were greeted by an icy chill that seemed to seep from the very stones of the house. Elizabeth shivered involuntarily, feeling an uneasy presence watching them. That first night, as they settled into their new home, the Hargraves were restless. The wind howled outside, rattling the old windows, and an unsettling sense of being watched pervaded the air. Emily, a sensitive child, woke in the middle of the night to the sound of faint whispers. She tiptoed out of her room and into the dimly lit corridor, her heart pounding in her chest. The whispers grew louder, leading her to an old, locked door at the end of the hallway. Unable to resist, Emily pressed her ear against the door. The voices were clearer now, a cacophony of anguished murmurs and desperate pleas. She felt a cold hand brush against her shoulder and screamed. Her parents rushed to her side, dismissing her terror as a child's nightmare. But the seed of fear had been planted. Over the following weeks, the strange occurrences multiplied. Elizabeth often felt a cold breeze pass through her even when no windows were open. Jonathan's dreams were plagued by shadowy figures and cryptic messages. The children spoke of seeing figures moving in the corners of their vision, only to disappear when looked at directly. One evening, while exploring the attic, Jonathan discovered an old, leather-bound journal. The pages were yellowed and brittle, filled with the scrawled handwriting of EADRIC House's previous owner, Sir William EADRIC. As he read the journal, Jonathan uncovered the dark history of the manor. Sir William had been a practitioner of the occult, obsessed with communicating with the dead. He had conducted numerous rituals within the house, attempting to summon spirits and harness their power. The journal detailed one such ritual that had gone horribly wrong. Sir William had inadvertently opened a gateway to the spirit world, allowing malevolent entities to enter the house. These spirits, trapped between worlds, now haunted EADRIC House, feeding off the fear and despair of its inhabitants. As Jonathan delved deeper into the journal, he realized that the only way to close the gateway was to perform a counter-ritual described in the final pages. However, the instructions were incomplete, the last pages torn out in what appeared to be a fit of madness. Desperate to protect his family, Jonathan sought the help of a local historian, Margaret Whittaker, who was well versed in the occult. Dr. Whittaker, a stern and no-nonsense woman, was initially skeptical of Jonathan's claims. However, upon examining the journal and visiting EADRIC House, she became convinced of the severity of the situation. She explained that the spirits bound to the house were growing stronger and more malevolent, feeding off the family's fear. If the gateway was not closed soon, the spirits could break free and wreak havoc on the living. With Dr. Whittaker's guidance, Jonathan and Elizabeth prepared to perform the counter-ritual. They gathered the necessary ingredients and followed the cryptic instructions as best as they could. The night of the ritual was dark and stormy, the wind howling like a chorus of tortured souls. As they began the ritual in the manor's ancient cellar, the temperature dropped dramatically, and the air grew thick with a palpable sense of malevolence. Candles flickered, casting eerie shadows on the stone walls, as Jonathan chanted the incantation. Elizabeth held the children close, her heart pounding with fear. Suddenly, the cellar door slammed shut, trapping them inside. The walls seemed to close in, and the whispers grew deafening. Ghostly figures emerged from the darkness, their faces contorted with anguish and rage. Dr. Whitaker, standing at the center of the ritual circle, urged Jonathan to continue the incantation. His voice trembled, but he pressed on, determined to save his family. The spirits swirled around them, their wails echoing through the chamber. Just as it seemed they would be overwhelmed, a blinding light filled the room, and the spirits shrieked in agony before vanishing into the ether. The air grew still, and the oppressive presence lifted. The Hargraves collapsed to the floor, exhausted but relieved. Dr. Whitaker confirmed that the gateway had been closed, and the spirits were finally at rest. The house, though still eerie and filled with shadows, no longer felt malevolent. In the aftermath, the Hargraves decided to leave EADRIC House, unable to shake the memories of their harrowing ordeal. They returned to London, vowing never to speak of the horrors they had endured. The manor, once again abandoned, stood as a silent testament to the dark history that had plagued it for centuries. EADRIC House became a local legend, a cautionary tale whispered among villagers and ghost hunters. Those brave enough to approach its gates spoke of an uneasy feeling, as if the house itself was watching them. Yet, despite its fearsome reputation, it remained a place of morbid fascination. Years later, a group of paranormal investigators ventured into EADRIC House, determined to uncover the truth behind the legends. Equipped with modern technology and an insatiable curiosity, they spent a night within its haunted halls. As they set up their cameras and sensors, the house seemed to awaken, the air growing cold and heavy. Throughout the night, the investigators experienced strange phenomena, flickering lights, disembodied voices, and shadowy figures captured on their cameras. But it wasn't until they discovered an old, hidden room in the basement that they realized the true extent of the house's dark history. The room was filled with occult symbols and relics, remnants of Sir William EADRIC's rituals. At its center lay a large, ornate mirror, its surface cracked and tarnished. As one of the investigators approached the mirror, a sense of dread washed over him. He felt an invisible force pulling him closer, his reflection distorted and twisted. In that moment, the mirror shattered, releasing a torrent of anguished spirits. The investigators fled in terror, abandoning their equipment and leaving EADRIC House to its restless inhabitants. The footage they left behind, later recovered and analyzed, revealed chilling images and sounds that defied explanation. EADRIC House, it seemed, would never truly be at peace. The spirits bound to its walls, victims of Sir William's dark experiments, continued to linger, their whispers echoing through the ages. The manor stood as a reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead, a place where the past could never be forgotten. To this day, EADRIC House remains one of England's most infamous haunted locations, drawing curious souls and thrill seekers to its gates. But those who dare to enter do so at their own peril, for the house is always watching, and its whispers never cease.